a debate on E-petition 598986 relating to safety at nightclubs. And I call Tonia Antoniazzi to move the motion.
Your chairship to discuss petition 598986 to make it a legal requirement for nightclubs to thoroughly search guests on entry. Now, we've all seen the stories coming in from around the UK, mainly women having their drinks spiked and even being jabbed with drugs in some nightclubs. I know that in Swansea, the police are investigating a number of incidents of drink spiking, and in Nottinghamshire, the police were dealing with 15 separate incidents of spiking with something sharp as of the last week. We now see nightclubs such as Sin City in Swansea taking action over the issue by ordering 12,500 stop tops, these anti-spiking lids, as well as implementing a policy that allows those who think their drink might have been spiked to get a replacement for free. In the absence of comprehensive drinks testing, I think that this makes sense. And whilst this is a welcome step from some nightclubs, what will happen after the media interest has died down? It's not good enough for this to be in the hands of some nightclub owners. This needs a realisation from government that something has to be done. And I'm aware of a number of clubs have extra security staff on the floors of their nightclubs, so surely it is not beyond the financial capabilities of the owners to invest in security checks, becoming a permanent feature across all clubs in the UK. Now, I understand that this has been a financially difficult 18 months for many venues, but does the Minister agree with me that with some investment in keeping people safe on a night out will make going out a much more attractive proposition, so would be worth it in the long run for club owners? Many colleagues will have seen the Big Night In initiative, where cities across the UK boycotted pubs and nightclubs in a show of defiance against the increase in spiking. Many town centres were much quieter than normal, and I think it goes to show that with 51% of the population, women, and indeed other groups who are vulnerable to spiking, there's a big spending power there, which has not been out in the clubs, and they've had their voices and concerns heard. But I would like to put on record my thanks to many of the groups who have supported this, including student unions, bars and clubs across the country, who closed early, and the men's rugby team from Swansea University, who were amongst the first to show their solidarity with the campaign. I will, yes.
Congratulate the Honourable Lady on bringing this forward. In the last month in Northern Ireland, we've had 21 incidents of spiking in the province. Does the Honourable Lady agree that it's necessary that all administrations of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland agree a policy that protects women? They can do it here centrally and then feed it out to administrations.
I welcome the comments from the Honourable Member, because what he is saying is exactly what needs to be done by the UK Government, working in hand with the devolved countries in order to take this forward. So I thank him for his contribution. But the petition has now been signed by over 172,000 people, including 180 people in Gower and 224 in the Minister's constituency, which demonstrates the strength of feeling about this issue. The aims set out by the petition are that the UK Government is to make its law that nightclubs must search guests on arrival to prevent harmful weapons and other items entering the establishment. This could be a pat-down search or a metal detector, but must involve measures being put in place to ensure the safety of the public. This seems wholly acceptable to me and many others, and the Government can take the lead on this, working with local authorities to put in place clear and definitive guidelines to protect the safety of people using licensed premises seems like a very sensible thing to do. It protects not just customers, but also club owners and workers. Maybe the Minister could answer these questions, such as how many people have been spiked before the Government will do anything? Will we have to wait for something terrible to happen before the Government is going to act? And local authorities are going to be key in making these key changes. As part of their licensing powers, they should be putting in measures to make clubs and pubs safe places to go. So what discussions has the Minister had with local government to address this? I'd like to thank Hannah Thompson, who started this petition, and for her hard work in promoting it, and for speaking to me last week. Hannah was a student in Edinburgh for 4 years, and even though she graduated last year, she still has friends based in Edinburgh, and it was a particular friend who showed Hannah the story about spiking with needles in Edinburgh. They both questioned how they were getting in, how these needles were getting into the clubs unprotected. And Hannah realised that in her entire time as a student, she had never been searched when going into a club. This prompted her to do some more research and found out that there actually was no law on this, and she felt she could change this. I will.
My honourable friend mentioned the very good work by Swansea Police, but she may not be aware of an individual case I had where a person was, in fact, spiked physically with a needle, and the day after their arm came up in a massive swelling. They went to the police, who said they were just drunk, and they refused to look at the CCTV evidence. I mean, doesn't she agree with me that it's important that, whilst this may be an isolated case, it's very important that the police take these issues very seriously, that we do look at any CCTV evidence, and we look at testing drinks as well as being piloted in Cornwall as well?
My honourable friend makes a very, very valid point, and to further his point, I think it's not an isolated incident. I think these are becoming increasingly visible, and they are happening in nightclubs across the country, specifically as a result of, when universities started, A&E departments, and I'm using anecdotal evidence here, but they have seen a rise in this, and it has been going, it needs to be reported. This is why it's really important for the government to take responsibility and to find out what this data is, and also to raise awareness, working with the local authorities and the police in order to ensure that it isn't seen as a drunken incident. Okay.
My point here is that it's imperative that the police do, in all occasions, take these issues very seriously and don't, as they sometimes do, as I understand, dismiss them, oh, she was drunk or whatever. And sometimes these people have been physically spiked, as opposed, or at least drugged.
I agree with my honourable friend that he is right, that there can be no excuses. Every incident that needs to be investigated by the police. Hannah also explained that when she went to a festival in Manchester, that she was thoroughly searched and her bag was swabbed to make sure she wasn't carrying any drugs. She was then given a stamp that required that she was searched again a couple of days later. There is no reason why this couldn't be introduced in clubs. Safety should never be about cost. What would the cost of serious injury, a rape or even a death be for a club owner? Much, much worse. When I spoke to Hannah about this petition last week, she outlined some of the comments she had received as a result of starting the petition. And I've had a look at her Instagram account. And even though Hannah has deleted a lot of the worst comments, there's a real misunderstanding of what this petition is trying to achieve. She sent me some screenshots, which, even though Hannah didn't call them abuse herself, they quite clearly constitute aggressive and sometimes threatening behaviour. Mainly men saying that she was a feminist, which, to be honest, I don't see that as an insult at all, and also a racist. This requirement would cover everyone entering a nightclub, and it is for everyone's safety. One theme of the comments that men were saying that women shouldn't be on a night out if they can't protect themselves. Now, some people aren't as fortunate to have played rugby for Wales like myself and be able to look after herself, but that's not the point. This is not what this is about. And those comments are not welcome. But how about men stop attacking women when we are just about going on and carrying out our lives? How about men start calling out other men on their behaviour? As the Duchess of Cornwall said last week, rapists are not born, they are constructed. Toxic masculinity, extreme porn and the normalisation of violence against women in all areas of popular culture drive this level of violence against women. And this is what the government needs to address.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
Yes. I'm grateful to her for giving way. Does she agree with me that there is a real need for a systemic approach to capturing data on the number of incidents across universities and also the police and the health services? And secondly, does she agree with me that some universities are falling way short and not taking responsibility in providing the healthcare in clinics by providing 24/7 care when young people, particularly women, after facing such an incident, do not want to go to accident and emergency or to go to the police straight away? They need on-site, on-campus support that they know how to access, because that's not the case in many universities across the country.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
Those are absolutely wonderful and excellent points that she's made. This should be data-driven, and the universities must be working. There's got to be consistency across the whole of the United Kingdom. There need to be guidelines, and that's why this petition does call on the government to take control of the situation. So, when I go back to think about how Hannah felt, a young girl, a year out of university, a year out of university, feels so motivated to make a difference. And she's in Edinburgh, just going about her everyday life. We have to take notice. This is happening everywhere. Now, what happened when Hannah reported some of those comments, and I go back in my speech to talk about her social media posts, what support was she getting from Instagram? Absolutely nothing. They said they wouldn't take action against those posts in the comments. So in the end, she had to delete them. And it became a really difficult thing for one person, one young woman, to have to deal with. So I say to those social media platforms that are unwilling to act, to get your house in order. You may be able to change your company name, but we still know who you are. And we will be taking action to make sure you clean up the cesspit that social media can be. And clubs themselves have to take a responsibility. When Hannah went on to one radio show to talk about this, a nightclub owner was arguing that the rise in reported drink spiking incidents was because students going out were not used to drinking so much after being stuck indoors because of COVID, and they were reporting it as spiking. This attitude, fortunately, seems to be limited to a few uncaring club owners. In fact, Mike Kill, the chairman of the Nighttime Industries Association, has called for the government to hold an inquiry into spiking. They would like to see a review of the way in which spiking is classified and recorded, meaning that they could look at solutions based on full facts. They've also highlighted a scheme put in place by Devon and Cornwall Police, which provided on-site testing as soon as there was a report of spiking. This meant that a uniform approach to reporting, assessment and evidence gathering increased the confidence and reduced the fear of crimes amongst customers. So can the Minister today agree that she will meet with me and the Nighttime Industries Association to discuss the scheme trialled in Devon and Cornwall and to see how we can roll this out across the country? Where there are patterns of this behaviour that can be identified, it is much easier for effective policies to be put in place, and this could be put in place quickly. I would also like to thank Hannah for talking to me about she and her friends felt, and I really appreciate her efforts on this and hope that we can get some concrete commitments from the Minister today. The last 18 months have been particularly hard on women. Sarah Everard, Nicole Smallman, Biba Henry, Sabina Nessa, and those women who were locked down with their abusers. The subject of this debate today is just part of a wider picture for women all over the United Kingdom. Violence towards women and girls is an epidemic of epic proportions, and the government must act now to stem it. I will, yes.
My honourable friend for giving way. The issue that we are addressing today was raised with me before the recent media attention by school students at King Edward's, the 7th school in Sheffield. And I mean, it's distressing the prevalence that they described in terms of their experience. But I've also had reports of incidents at house parties. So would she agree that the issue doesn't simply end with nightclubs, but is about a wider spectrum of behaviour? Now, there have been some good campaigns. My own student union in Sheffield has taken a good initiative. Some nightclubs are working well, but there hasn't, as she said, been the comprehensive approach that's needed. So would she agree that the the government needs to work with the police and the other authorities to treat the issue more seriously, and, as she says, see it in the wider context of violence against women and girls, and that the strategy needs to challenge the whole spectrum of behaviour, which starts with casual harassment and ends with sexual violence.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
I thank my honourable friend for his comments there, because that is really shocking when you find out that your school pupils in your constituency were raising this issue with you before it even came to the public eye. Shows that they know about it through social media, through those platforms, and they have that understanding that this is a danger and that this can be going on. What concerns me is that if this is happening in not just in nightclubs, this is happening in the wider community, in house parties. This is becoming a craze, a trend. It has to be taken seriously by everybody. And this is why education is key. We have issues in this country around access. More people are online now, younger people, and they have access to all sorts of very, very dangerous pornography and materials. And that also needs addressing as a cultural issue. Yes.
Tomorrow, North Yorkshire Police will be having a multi-agency meeting to discuss this very issue of spiking, including with the universities and higher education institutes. Does she not also believe that we need to talk about trauma services and services which are available, which we know are seriously underfunded and understaffed at this time?
Tonia Antoniazzi.
I thank my honourable friend for her comments there about the trauma services, because as we've seen, those services are needed 24/7 at universities, they're needed at police stations, they are needed everywhere, and they have to be addressed. So we cannot go on like this. Radical actions need to be taken. Misogyny should be a hate crime. Support for women facing domestic abuse needs to be restored. Education for boys and men put in place. This is a specific debate, but it speaks to a much wider issue, one which needs actions and not words today. Thank you.
The question is, this House considered E-petition 319891 relating to the sale and use of fireworks. Steve Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I very strongly welcome this debate today. I think it's extremely important. I think the members who've spoken before me have said things with which I've overwhelmingly agreed. The reason that I came to today's debate is that this morning a concerned parent, contacted me about this, what was to me a new horror of spiking by injection. I think it's fair to say that when I was young enough to be going to nightclubs a very long time ago, we might have feared that people would spike our drinks with spirits. But this idea that today overwhelmingly understand young women might be spiked by injection is to me a really grave horror. And I think I want to use that word grave a few times. It seems to me that to inject a person against their will should be regarded as a grave assault, one of the most serious assaults, not only against their will, but with a substance unknown, for the purpose of intoxicating them, presumably, ordinarily with a view towards raping them. And this is the most extraordinary horror, and yet, as we heard earlier, possibly the police don't always take it as seriously as they might. And I really want to know what my honourable friend the Minister is going to do to make sure that what is the most exceptionally serious assault is treated as such. I think this kind of crime should attract the most serious penalties, and that no one should be in any doubt whatsoever about how serious it is. And that includes security staff at nightclubs, it includes police officers, and though I don't wish to assign any blame to any of these groups, ambulance crews should also, it seems to me, be aware of the risk that somebody they pick up who may seem to be intoxicated, they seem to them to be intoxicated, might in fact have been injected with a drug. Now, this morning, after I heard this account, which was so alarming to me, I called Michael Kill, of the Chief Executive of the Nightclub Industry Association, and asked him about it. And I won't repeat the remarks the Honourable Lady made about his comments, but I will just add this extra quote. Our industry has been deeply concerned by the rise in reported spiking incidents across the country and have been extremely proactive in our reaction so that everyone can enjoy a night out free from fear of being spiked, as it should be, end quote. And he goes on to refer to the Home Office inquiry that the Industry Association has sought, to which the Honourable Lady referred earlier. So I want to strongly endorse this call for action on spiking by injection. Of course I care about spiking by alcohol going in drinks as well, but I do think we should draw a distinction that to inject somebody with a substance unknown ought to be treated as amongst the most grievous assaults that could be carried out, partly because of its motivation is probably to be a later rape. I mean, I'm so horrified I find it difficult to put words around it, so I don't wish to labour the point. The final point I want to make is, and this is a difficult one to make, because the Honourable Lady in her remarks made the point about men as a class, if I may say so. And I don't doubt for one moment that men as a class conduct most of the violence that is conducted against others and against women. And I'm very much inclined to take the position that she set out of saying men need to do this and men need to do that. But actually one of the women in my team, who has worked in the past with abused men, has asked me not to do it. Because actually the vast majority of men are decent and civilised, law-abiding people. Well, just one moment, and I will give way. Decent and civilised, law-abiding people who, of course, want women treated with respect and of course, wouldn't perpetrate violence. And so I've actually been asked, despite, if I may say so, a mistaken chivalry on my part, not to blame men as a class. And of course, I give way to them.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
And I totally respect the comments that he's making about men. It's just that the victims in this case do tend to be women and the perpetrators do tend to be men. But I completely respect how my comments may have come across like that, but I wish it to be known that we do have an issue that we need to address. It is largely but let's work together and not make this an issue of sex, the class of sex. Let's make it an issue about how we can keep people safe.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr Gray, I absolutely welcome what the Honourable Lady has said, and I'm grateful to her for it. Oh, suddenly we're having a debate. I will give way to the Honourable Lady and then the Honourable Gentleman, and then I'll conclude.
I totally respect what he's saying, and yes, of course, we should not undo that many men obviously behave well and decent to women. But we do have a culture where women are not treated with respect, where through banter, through all sorts of things, it goes then into further more horrible and violent behaviour. And I think it is the underlying culture of disrespect to women that is unfortunately still very prevalent that we need to attack. Well, we need to work to reduce and attack.
Steve Baker.
Thank you, Mr Gray. Of course, as I've said on the record here, my instinct is with the Honourable Lady and the Honourable Lady that, but as I say, I've been asked to swallow my pride and not to demand that fellow men as a class change their behaviour. It's men who can commit wicked acts who need to change. It's men whose attitude to women is appalling who need to change. It's people who do wicked things who need to change. And I just think we do need to be a bit careful about painting all men as some kind of criminal. I'll give way, since I promised, the Honourable Gentleman, then the Honourable Lady, then I'm really...
You're right, Davis.
It's very welcome. Thank you for letting me intervene. I mean, the basic point is that 5.2% of sexual assaults involve drugging people, and of those 5% are against women and 0.2% are against men. In other words, the incidence is 25-fold for women. So we've got to put this in context. There are men and women who are victims, but basically it's all about men attacking women. So let's not pretend it isn't.
Oh, well, I'm grateful. I hope the Honourable Gentleman won't mind me saying, I think any fair-minded person listening to my remarks won't suggest for a moment that I've pretended what he's suggested. I'm just making the point, really, Mr Gray, that what we need to do is carry all men with us. I think all men need to understand that we all have a duty towards women and to treat women equally. But we've also, I think, got to be careful not to do what I've done, perhaps, in the past, which is to have a chivalry which is these days seen as misplaced. I think it's worth just, I don't think my wife would mind me saying that I'm married to a retired Royal Air Force Wing Commander who's been on operational service a number of times, and I think I can fairly claim to be capable of treating women equally, and indeed I recognise that my military service was not anything like my wife's. So I yield to no one really in my my willingness to treat women with respect and equally. And I do recognise the statistical reality the honourable gentleman gives. But I think in this debate we do need to recognise that we need to carry men with us if we're going to solve the problem of violence against women and girls. And I'd gladly give way for the last
Thank you, and I thank the
Levy.
member for giving way, and I think he makes a valid point, but I hope the member will agree with me that before we can get to those men who rightly treat women with the respect which they deserve, we have to educate our young boys. It starts from school. Those young boys will then grow up to be those same men that we want to stand up and protect, those men that will carry society with them.
Steve Bacon.
I'm grateful to her for raising schools, and I have to say that every time I listen to teachers, and indeed particularly head teachers, I hear inspiring messages about how we should behave and the values that we should have. Indeed, messages that I wish were heard far more often amongst the adult population, not least sometimes members of Parliament, although also I exclude everyone here today. But I agree with her about schools and education, and yet we have to ask ourselves, how can it be that head teachers and teachers generally do articulate values that we can all be proud of, and yet somehow people make it through the system and end up conducting violence against women and girls, which does begin sometimes with relatively minor behaviours, which then escalates out of all proportion into the most heinous crimes. And we really do have to challenge ourselves on all of these matters. But if I may, to conclude, Mr Gray, the point I came to make today is that in this process of escalation and abuse of women, overwhelmingly, we ought really to be taking much more seriously the problem of spiking people by injection. It seems to me it is amongst the most grievous crimes that one could conceive. It seems to me that it leads overwhelmingly towards an intention to rape women, and it must be treated with the gravity that these implications deserve, and I very much hope that my honourable friend the Minister will reassure us all that spiking by injection will be dealt with in a proper manner.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to pick up on some of the points that were just made and those by my honourable friend, the member for Gower. In terms of, for me, this has come not out of nowhere, but the incidents and just the escalation of it and the scale seems to be quite extraordinary. And whilst the date rape drugging was very much on my radar, and I'm sure that of many others, this sudden phenomenon of spiking through needle is really shocking escalation indeed. In terms of the wider issue, I'm looking at the statistics. I saw that the figures obtained by the BBC back in 2019 showed a rise in drink spiking, recorded cases, of more than 2,600 incidents in England and Wales since 2015. So this is a significant problem that we see in our society. But just this week, Nottinghamshire Police said that it received a total of 15 reports of alleged spiking with a sharp object since October the 2nd. I mean, that's a month ago. And that's just in Nottinghamshire. And then Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary called violence against women an epidemic, and I quote. And so the authorities have got to treat it with as much urgency as fighting terrorism. And then I'm sure many of us will have been horrified by the incident in Texas, which illustrates that this is not just a UK problem. There is a phenomenon, and the kind of copycat behaviour, as was being talked about perhaps by my honourable friend in terms of social media and how quickly these things get shared, maybe amongst males, not just across campuses or towns or cities, countries, but globally, that in Texas, where 8 people died and hundreds were hurt, but the fact that police are investigating reports that somebody in the audience was injecting people with drugs, and such that several concert goers had to be revived with an anti-drug overdose medicine. As of the 23rd of October, the NPCC had also collected 198 reports of drink spiking, in addition to the 56 reports of incidents involving a needle. Chair, this is, I wouldn't say necessarily an epidemic at this stage, but it is a seriously concerning phenomenon. And under a Freedom of Information requests collected by Sky News that were published back in 2018, found that reported incidents of spiking had doubled in the 3 years before. So whilst I don't have the data to hand, I didn't have time to put it all together, it is really alarming where this phenomenon is taking us. I will indeed.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. Does he agree with me that this problem has got a new face to it, but as he's pointed out, it's been there in the form of drugs that are used for rape, and I certainly came across examples in my own constituency in the past. Does he agree that the use of needles adds another health dimension and the spread of disease, HIV being one of them, and hospitals need to quickly to respond to that risk as well, and that Universities UK needs to come together and address some of the challenges at university level to support students. And finally, conviction is required for those who are perpetrating, and we need to know what the police are being instructed to do by the government to get a grip on this issue before more fatalities occur.
Matt Weston.
I agree entirely with my honourable friend that there is an urgent need, really, for, A, the data that I think was being talked about earlier in the debate, but also the urgent need for multi-agency meetings to be brought together through the local authorities, the police, universities, wherever. But as it was being discussed about some of the work being done by Devon and Cornwall, that was of real interest to me, just what was discussed earlier. But I think that certainly we as parliamentarians should be pushing for that, but so should the government be urging that those authorities, through the Home Office and elsewhere, should actually be calling on chief constables, working with local authorities, working with those on campuses and universities and further education colleges to be leading in trying to address this phenomenon. It certainly is something that the National Union of Students is really alarmed by. And they are, of course, quite rightly urging that any case needs to be investigated quickly, and the findings need to be shared across the country through different authorities, because at the moment there's an information vacuum. The data, as was being discussed, we just don't have. But we need to know what the scale of the problem is, particularly with the injection spikings that my honourable friend was referring to. And it is alarming. Students across the country are understandably very anxious and panicking about this, some taking extreme measures in an effort to protect themselves when venturing out. The reports that we're getting are extremely horrifying, and they need investigating. But perhaps what the NUS would be saying is that we have to be perhaps cautious about measures to increase surveillance in clubs, because they indeed can create problems of their own. I wanted to refer to a couple of examples in my own constituency, but before I do, I'd gladly hand over to my right honourable friend, Member for Nottingham.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I apologise, Mr Chairman, that I wasn't able to be here for the start of the debate. I was in a delegated legislation committee. Does my honourable friend agree with me that in formulating a response to these reports of spiking by injection and the impact that it's having on young women and on their lives because of the fear that they feel, that it's really important that the authorities, the police, our universities and our health services listen to young women in terms of the things that they want and the things that would allow them to feel safe, and also the things that they want to hear in terms of men changing their behaviour, because this shouldn't be about victims, it should be about changing the behaviour of perpetrators.
Matt Weston.
I absolutely agree with the point that she makes, and it is about changing behaviour amongst perpetrators and young men. And going back to the points that I think were made earlier by my honourable friend, which I'm going to say Vauxhall, hopefully I'm right, is absolutely that the problem starts at a very young age, and we have to change behaviour and the norms of behaviour, certainly amongst young males, at a much younger age. But she's right in the point that she makes. I wanted to just come on to two examples. I didn't want to take examples from across the country, but these are very real examples that I've had to deal with in terms of constituency casework. And so they're specific to the university close to me, University of Warwick. One constituent's daughter who was unable to seek urgent medical care, and so she had to travel to actually her home in Manchester Royal Infirmary. And because she could not get the care that she needed locally, the hospital has implemented a separate pathway and recording system for spiking victims. So, I mean, all credit that Manchester should have done that. And another student who is currently in A&E at University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire, being treated for a suspected spiking with a needle. And this is just in the last couple of weeks. And no wonder, and quite rightly, how, when was referenced about the Girls' Night In campaign, to draw attention to this nationally, and it needs to impact on the economy on the nighttime economy, and for people to wake up to the immediate urgency of this, if we're going to bring about change. I would echo the calls, as I said earlier. What was interesting was listening to the point being made about the work being done in Devon and Cornwall, and if there is a chance of rolling this out, then terrific. But we need quickly to share this information, and I hope the Minister will be listening carefully to this, because it does need leadership from the government. This is a terrifying phenomenon for young women, and it is leading to a real change of behaviour in our towns and cities. And we need to, the government and the police need to get to grips with it very quickly and ensure that the nighttime industry meets with them and can bring about the changes that are needed. The NUS has certainly called for greater training for staff, just to understand or to identify those visiting their nightclubs and so on, looking at alcohol vulnerability, the potential for sexual harassment and assault, and with a focus on how to respond and intervene if incidents take place. I think that one of the things that I want to do in my constituency is certainly to pull together the police, the local authorities, the university, but also meet with a panel of young women to understand what is really going on there. This is happening so quickly, but it does need a response from government, and I really hope that they will look to work with all sectors to coordinate some sort of response, because it does need urgent leadership from them. And with that, Chair, I close my remarks.
Vera Hobhouse.
Going out and having fun is an important part of everyone's life. We need it for our general well-being, we need it to switch off from our busy working lives, and we all need it for our social life. Nobody should be excluded from it or living in fear that their night out will turn into a nightmare. Why should so many women live with that fear when most men don't? I'm fully behind the many women, including in my constituency in Bath, who have taken to the streets or boycotted nightclubs to campaign against the rise in spiking incidents. Just imagine the fear and trauma of suddenly losing control of your body on a night out. Your vision becomes blurry, you feel dizzy or sick, your memory disappears. You wake up in the morning with no recollection of how you got home, or with a fear that something really bad happened that you cannot even remember. Spiking is predominantly an attack on women. It happens primarily to young women. One of my constituents wrote to me to say, not only have I been spiked myself, so have 2 of my close friends and nameless other girls I know. The National Police Chiefs Council has reported almost 200 confirmed incidents of drink spiking across the UK in the last 2 months alone. Reports of spiking by needle have added an extra layer of fear. And I completely agree with the Honourable Member from Gower that it actually really needs to be treated with much more severity because it's another level of crime. These recent reports are not isolated incidents. Data shows that drink spiking has been a growing problem in the UK for several years. There have been over 2,600 reports of spiking to the police in England and Wales made between 2015 and 2019. This number may just be the tip of the iceberg. Many who have been spiked do not come forward. Some have called for increased police presence in venues or for searches upon entry to nighttime venues. I am not sure that this is the right approach to stamping out spiking once and for all. As we have seen with stop and search policies under the government's hostile environment, increased police presence and searches often end up disproportionately affecting marginalised communities. We need a solution that considers the impact on all groups within our society. However, the government should act urgently to make nighttime venues safer for everybody. Spiking test strips should be made freely available at every venue. If necessary, this should be backed by government funding. Police and venue staff should be given specified training to spot the signs of spiking, so they can give proper support when incidents occur. I urge the Minister to convene a conference of senior police officers from forces across the country as soon as possible. We need to get a complete picture of what is happening and draw up a national action plan on spiking, and particularly the urgency around spiking by injection. Mr. Chair, there is an epidemic of violence against women. This rise in spiking incidents is simply the latest manifestation. We need to get to the root causes of why so many women are still regarded as inferior or worse, as a target for hate. And again, I agree with the member for Gower. Wickham, sorry. No, you're absolutely right. I'm terrible about constituency, never mind. About names. I agree with the honourable member for Wickham that we need to bring everybody with us in order to get that behavioural change. I do get it, but we also need to call out what needs to be called out, and that is that it is increasing. It's increasing, and it's predominantly a crime of men on women, and we cannot paint that out of the picture. But yes, absolutely, we need to have men on our side and men to also find this despicable. And I know that many men, in particular in this chamber here, find this despicable and are on our side as women to stamp this behaviour out. I repeat, however, my call to the Minister to make misogyny a hate crime. The culture that allows crimes like spiking to continue without sanction must change. Women must be given the confidence that the system is not stacked against them. They must be confident that those who are perpetrators of disrespect and hate against women are being brought to justice. And this starts by making misogyny a hate crime. But today we are talking about spiking, and I really look for leadership from the government, urgent action, call a conference of all senior police officers across the country to get a proper picture, and listen to the young women who have been affected by this despicable crime, and listen to what they are particularly asking for. Thank you.
Florence Sishlomi.
I'm so sorry. Thanks to serve under your chairmanship. And as the Honourable Member for Bath has just highlighted, we've seen nearly 200 reports of drink spiking in the UK, with 58 of these being recorded by the Met Police here in London. And each of those reports represent a shocking violation of a woman's and victim's safety and privacy. And as my honourable member, the member for Gower, has highlighted, the vast majority of these victims are women, young women. And it can have a big, devastating impact on their lives and the consequences later on. The reality is no one is immune from this spiking, and every woman feels the impact of the spiking every time they go out. Now, coming out of lockdown in July, so many people were looking forward to going out, enjoying that freedom again, being able to go out clubbing. And for a number of women, going out to support their local bars and clubs was something that they wanted to do. And for some of those young women in my constituency, at the King's College University campus in Waterloo, these past few months has represented the first time they've been able to go out, a number of them first-year students. This is a seminal time for everyone, and they should be enjoying that freedom. And my constituency of Vauxhall has so many thriving nightclubs and bars, a number that some members in this House may have visited on a number of occasions. But unfortunately, for some of these young women, they've had to live in fear of becoming a victim of spiking whenever they go out. And too often in these debates, we are having to hear about the steps that women have to take to keep themselves safe. But why are we policing women's behaviour in response to a problem they did not cause? That needs to change. The tragic death of Sarah Everard earlier this year showed that we have women jumping through hoops and having to change their behaviour, and we're told that they need to keep safe. But still, the issue of misogynistic violence and abuse goes on. It's not good enough for us to tell women to avoid going clubbing, to not be drunk when you go out, to be uber vigilant when you go out. It's not good enough, especially when if they continue to even do all these things, they can still be subject to this harmful spiking. In a bar, in a club, on their way home, women must be able to enjoy their night out with the same freedom and severity as their male colleagues. We need to look at how we take a sea change in treating violence against women and girls to tackle misogyny and hate. And if we want to make our society safer, that has to include having conversations with everybody, including our men. So I hope the Minister will reassure us this afternoon and outline what steps the government will be taking to fully address this.
Well, should give way.
You're right, Davis. I think she's giving way to Davis.
Is she as concerned as I am about reports of WhatsApp groups in the Metropolitan Police containing misogynistic, sexist and racist commentary, often about victims? And will you agree with me that there needs to be a wholesale review of this and to pull out the rotten apples out of the barrel so that we can culturally change the Metropolitan Police as well as the education system with a view to moving forward on this so women aren't in fear and can go out in freedom? Florence Ishlomi.
I agree with my colleague, and I think what we should highlight is the fact that this one bad apple doesn't just happen in isolation with the Met Police. Unfortunately, this is an issue right across our police forces in the UK. And I, again, hope that the Minister can outline what steps will be taken where officers have been found guilty. In my view, I think there should be clear disciplinary action for those officers and making sure that there's more training, including training against dealing with misogyny for our police officers.
The Shadow Minister, the Honourable from Birmingham Yardley, was unavoidably detained in the Chamber at the beginning of the debate and therefore missed the first half of the Honourable Lady's speech. Because of the perfectly reasonable reasons for her being delayed, I'm therefore content to allow her to speak for the opposition. Jess Phillips.
I thank the Chairman and apologise to all assembled. I did try to leave the chamber and was then called as I was leaving and assured by the Speaker that he wanted me to speak. So I do apologise, though. I have read the Honourable Lady's remarks and I'm forever grateful to her for making them. My honourable friend from Gower is a brilliant advocate of women's rights, and it is no surprise to hear her speaking up with the petitioners in this particular instance. It's also no surprise to me to see the number of members in the room who represent university towns and the clear level of concern from across the country about this particular issue, which I don't know what the explanation is, and I very much doubt that the Minister knows what the explanation is for this sudden moment that it is breaching the headlines. It seems unusual that this is occurring, apart from the fact that it's not in any way unusual that women in our country have to run the gauntlet, whether that's at home, at work, going out on a night out, whether it's walking to just get anywhere, going on a bus, and in some terrible cases approaching those agencies who are meant to be there to protect them. I'm afraid to say that spiking is by no means a new thing. In 2019, the BBC investigation uncovered 2,600 reports of drink spiking to police in England and Wales over the previous 4 years, and everybody will know that this is a tiny fraction of what was actually happening. Who knows? I mean, every woman I know has been on a night out with a group of their friends, and one of them is suddenly uncontrollable, or suddenly their legs have gone away from them, they're much drunker than they should be. This is not an unusual circumstance. But the trouble is when it's violence against women and girls, it doesn't matter that there were 2,600 reports of it already in 2019. Never quite reaches, we never seem to ever be able to quite reach the big enough number for things to actually get done about it. So I sort of stand in front of the House of Commons regularly and say, I mean, the ONS this week told us that rape had gone up by 8%, reported rape had gone up by 8%, so it's 62,000. It's 1.6 million women who are victims of domestic abuse. And only 2 years ago, there were 2,600 reports of drink spiking. And so this new phenomenon, this new issue, which I think that the intervention of a needle is the thing that has been frightening. So the member for Wickham quite rightly pointed out this seems to be need to carry a more severe punishment. And to me, carrying into a nightclub a drug to put into somebody's drink or to an injection, which seems harrowing to inject somebody, that's like carrying a knife. That is like carrying a weapon. It's not like it. It is carrying a weapon. The only aim is to harm. Well,
she's absolutely right. And she's also right that we don't really know what's going on here. And I wonder whether there's a kind of dual phenomenon where we have a very well-known and long-standing problem with drink spiking, which seems to be even increasing, putting vulnerable women mainly at risk. But I wonder if there's also a kind of an allied or something else going on, which is just people being stabbed by a sharp implement, a needle stick injury, and for reasons unknown or motivation unknown, and that becoming a kind of copycat thing around the country. Yeah. And those two things it could be that those two phenomena are going on at the same time. And although the reason I raise it is I think
be brief.
She's right. Yes, she's right that both are problems, and that's why I think it's really important that the call from the Nighttime Industries Association for an inquiry into this to get to the bottom of it we should go.
Just Phillips.
I mean, I agree. Although I have to say, it's not necessarily even that is a new phenomenon, because I'm a little old for it now. I'm not actually. But I remember there being a phenomenon around where both myself and the honourable lady, who is a near neighbour to my constituency and at certain points has been a nearer representative in Birmingham, there was a story about a particular nightclub in Birmingham, which is no longer there, so it doesn't. I can name it and not bring it into any disrepute. It was called the Dome, and there was all these stories about pinpricks being, and you're talking 20 years ago in this instance. So I don't know whether it's a new phenomenon. I don't know. But the thing is that we don't know. And what women know, and what the Honourable Lady's suggestion and this petition suggestion is seeking, is for some level of security so that women can go in and feel safe in a place knowing that You know, the people in there, you can never stop at all harm, you can't. But it does seem, and I really hope to hear from the Minister, some real tangible asks and action about how we're going to make sure people can feel safe. I will give way first of all to Bath.
Thank you for giving way. Very quickly, does she feel like me that there might be a fatality at some point? And then, you're going to think, blah, blah, blah. Why do we always wait until something really, really dreadful happens before we take action?
Yes, Phyllis.
I mean, every single constituency member of Parliament who has ever tried to get any sort of road safety in and been told that they have to wait till somebody dies on that street before, here's your call. But I'm afraid to say that even if somebody does die in this circumstance, a woman is murdered every 3 days in the UK by violence against women and girls. If that was happening at football matches in our country, football matches would be banned. The reality is that I actually don't think that that's the thing that suddenly changes it. But, I want to hear from the ministers exactly what are they going to do to make it so that women can feel safe and that perpetrators are the ones who are scared. I give way.
Rachel Maskell.
Honourable friend for giving way. The reality is this is all about an assault against a woman and somebody pervading her space, and that is the issue that needs to be addressed. And the reality is also that we know there is massive underreporting about violence against women, so whatever those statistics are, the reality is probably far, far greater, and therefore it's about bringing action about now, no matter if it was one case or several thousand cases.
Yes, Phyllis.
Absolutely. The underreporting of this, and actually the underreporting of all violence against women and girls is well charted. We estimate at best we're hearing 20%. Used to be that only 8 or 4% of people had come forward about rape, but at the very best we're seeing 20% of the problem, and 80% of it is missing from our eyes. But in this case, in the cases of nightclubs, what worries me even further is that young women, especially, and I remember this because I was one, won't speak up because of fears for their liberties, for example, and I mean their liberty in that they won't be able to go out again. Their mums and dads and people will, you keep those secrets close to you when bad things happen to you when you're young because you're worried about your freedom and your liberty. Also, in nightclubs and things, there will be, whether, we like it or not, or there will be people who are taking recreational drugs. That's just the world we live in, and the idea of people not wanting to come forward, and so we're not seeing this because they're frightened about recreational drugs that they may have been taking, I think is also something that we have to deal with. And we don't only just want to deal with perfect victims. We must never fall foul of the idea that we, as so many of us have over many years, to see a victim only who is sort of got a halo, and therefore we can see their abuses and not others.
Way, and she's making a very powerful speech, as she always does on this subject. But does she share my concern that one of the reasons why women may not come forward, and in fact why we don't have evidence of whether there's a link between these sharp object incidents and toxicology, is because when women do seek help in these instances of spiking, is they are sometimes not believed, they're dismissed as being drunk, they attend, I'm told that they attend accident and emergency and they're not seen quickly, that it's part of that response is actually discouraging women and preventing us from actually getting the evidence that we need that would allow us to better understand this latest problem.
Yes, Phillips.
She is absolutely right, and our honourable friend from Warwick and Leamington pointed out very clearly that one of his constituents had that exact experience and had found that. And the honourable lady from Gower talking about good services in and best practice in Devon and Cornwall, some best practice, it seems, in hospitals in Manchester, as was highlighted by honourable members. But that cannot simply be the case, and that would be the case with all violence against women and girls, that those presenting at A&E will be made to feel brilliant in some places, brilliant, amazing and believed, and there will be specialist workers there, and in other cases just absolutely not so much. But the single most important thing that the government have to tackle going forward is not actually how victims interact with the system. We have spent so many years trying to end well, no, actually, we've just tried to improve the experience of the people who end up in this situation, which is noble. I'm not going to stop trying to do that, and I'm sure nobody else in the House will. But the fundamental is now that we have got to end the perpetration, and we have got to make perpetrators feel frightened that if they were caught with this, that's a similar fear of being caught with a knife in a nightclub. A rape victim once said to me, if I had a stab wound, I wouldn't have to prove that I'd been stabbed. Everybody would be able to see that I'd been stabbed. But when I've been raped, I have to prove it. I have to prove it to you. So I as well as many of the brilliant examples from Swansea and elsewhere that have already been over, women are really speaking up with one voice on this. And I have spoken as well to some women. I spoke to a local councillor in Oxfordshire earlier who has been dealing with around 20 cases that have come forward to her on this particular issue. She's in fact working with 25 young student freshers who've all been spiked in recent months. All of them reported deep reluctance to report to the police, citing they did not want the hassle, or they were worried that they'd not be taken seriously. And statistics are starting to flood in too from big organisations and small. And I'm sure we can all look to Instagram. I came across Birmingham Women's Safety Initiative group that had done a survey of 100 Birmingham respondents, and over 95% of them said they felt unsafe in their local area. As always, I stand with each and every one of these women. There are things that we can do now, and I would like to hear what the government is going to do to make sure that these happen. Venues must be clearly led to do far more robust security and search protocols. Training for staff, high quality and well-positioned CCTV the Minister may know this. I'm not always a fan of just a sticking plaster of CCTV, because I'd like somebody to be stopped from hurting me rather than my body being able to be found. But in clubs, where I have seen this work well is where something is found on CCTV and it's not made out that the woman was drunk or stupid or lying or attention seeking. I do have a slight concern that I would raise with regards to searching of nightclubs, and that is the protocols in which we test and secure staff who work on the doors of nightclubs. There has been a series of newspaper articles over recent weeks about the vetting of people who work on doors and how we vet the people who will be doing that. And I'm afraid to say that in lots of circumstances, what journalists found that a lack of vetting hadn't found with door staff was those who had been convicted of sexual assaults. So, and I have to say, one of the myself remembering what it was like to be searched going in and out of clubs, that often that can feel like a sexual assault to lots of women. So making sure as well that there are women on hand to be ensuring that these searches are done properly and appropriately. I certainly would only ever want to be searched by a woman myself. I think that it's very important that we don't just say that this is just another one of those issues, that there's not much that can be done about it. The government need to start telling us exactly how they're going to be dealing with perpetrators of violence against women and girls. Currently, they are resisting, stating for the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Bill that they will make this a serious crime, that local authority areas have to, not can choose to if they like, because that's the sort of standing we give violence against women and girls, that they have to have a violence against women and girls prevention plan, as they would do with crimes such as county lines, and they have to have a public health approach to that locally. And in this instance, they could be working with licensing, which would be incredibly helpful to have a protective duty. So I would hope to see the government committing finally to say that they are going to make violence against women and girls a serious crime that has a serious crime prevention duty. But mainly to hope that they are going to take the advice of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Police Forces and Fire Services, which the honourable member for the old Prime Minister, whose seat I currently can't remember, Maidenhead, is it? Maidenhead. She did lots of good work in this area. The very long name for the inspectorate is not something that I'm ever going to thank her for. It is a ridiculously long name. But Her Majesty's Inspectorate have clearly set out a timeline and a time frame for exactly how police forces could be working to tackle perpetration and build up trust in victims to come forward, and the government are still resisting for some reason on how they are going to do this. So I will sit down now so that the Minister can speak. But I just wanted to finish by saying my parliamentary assistant, as I was preparing this, told me this morning that at the weekend her and her mates had to compare the features of their new safety key rings, which included whistles, seatbelt cutters and rape alarms, just so that they can go on a night out. It's no longer on the young people in this country and the women in this country to make themselves feel safer. It's on the government now.
Rachel Maclean.
Thank you very much, Mr Gray, and can I begin by saying what a pleasure it is to serve under your chairmanship. And I'm extremely grateful to all members who've spoken in this debate. It has been a wide-ranging and, I think, an excellent debate with some really good contributions from across the House. I want to start off by saying I'm incredibly grateful to Hannah Thompson for starting this petition, and I think the Honourable Lady Fugawa has outlined her tributes, and I really want to add my voice to that, because it's not a small undertaking to present a petition to Parliament at any age, and particularly when you are the age of Hannah. And so I want to pay tribute to her and to all the other campaigners in this space who have successfully brought a debate in Parliament, and we are now discussing these issues, and I hope according it the seriousness that it does deserve. So I also agree with the Honourable Lady Fugawa when she said that we women are 51% of the population and we wield considerable financial muscle. And part of the natural financial muscle is going out on a night out. And it's something that I'm absolutely sure that all of us have enjoyed in the past. For some of us, it's a more distant past, perhaps, Mr Gray?
No,
Or perhaps not, Mr Gray. Perhaps, there we go. But I certainly do, in common with the Honourable Lady for Yardley, remember many nights out in various Birmingham nightclubs, including the one that she has referred to, and many others. And I think that's Of course I will.
Thank you. Thank the Minister for the points that she's making. On the points of going out in the past, would the Minister agree that we need to see more women and girls going out, supporting our full range of businesses, the nighttime economy, in terms of that flexible muscle power, but that will not happen until they feel safe?
Yes, I thank the Honourable Lady, and she's absolutely right that the nighttime economy is a vital part of our economy, and it is all part. It's very important we have that thriving local economy. It's a vital part of the financial prosperity and part of our Building Back Better agenda. So just to turn to the issue in hand, there of course are growing concerns about safety in the nighttime economy, and this petition and the specific focus on searches in nightclubs comes as no surprise. And we know that over 172,000 people have added their name to this, and I'm sure that that is driven by the concern over the rise of media reports on spiking and the focus on what is perhaps not completely new issue, but certainly I feel like it is a the needle aspect of this is something that I think is new, or certainly receiving a lot more attention than it has done at the past, although members have rightly said that spiking of drinks is something that we have seen for some time. So the reports of spiking, whether it is adding substances to drinks or injecting people with needles, are extremely concerning. And I have every sympathy with victims and with anyone who might feel unable to go out and enjoy a night out without fear, because, of course, it is the fear here. The fear factor is very serious, and no one should feel frightened or feel vulnerable as they're going out. And we utterly condemn those people who perpetrated those attacks, and those people should be brought to justice. So I do want to start off by saying very clearly, I want to reassure members that this is something that we are taking seriously. The day that we heard the first reports, which I think was a few weeks ago, the Home Secretary wasted no time in getting reports and requiring additional data and convening police chiefs to come together at the highest level. So let me be clear, any spiking constitutes a serious criminal offence. It constitutes criminal conduct, sorry. The necessary offences are on the statute book. In response to my honourable friend for High Wycombe, where a drink is spiked and where there is sexual motivation, administering a substance with intent, it is an offence under the Sexual Offences Act. It could carry a 10-year sentence. Depending on the nature of the specific assault or offence, it could also be classed as common assault, which of course could be GBH, and that could carry a sentence of 5 years up to a maximum of 10 years imprisonment. So I want to reassure him that this is a serious criminal offence. As with any crime, it falls to the police to investigate the crime and ensure that those responsible are dealt with in accordance with the law. So I want to also update the House that there is no doubt that police are taking this seriously and they are working at pace to gather intelligence and identify perpetrators. So it is a changing and evolving picture. So we've been gathering reports from forces across the country, and at the time of me making these remarks, we have reports of 218 reports of needle assaults and injections since September. And over the same period, the police are aware of 250 drink spikings. And I think those numbers broadly chime with what members have also reported to me. But these numbers are subject to change, of course, as the police continue to gather information. And I think the Honourable Lady from Yardley is right when she has said that this is a crime where not all instances are reported. And I would strongly encourage anyone who has been a victim to report it to the police. But it does mean it is difficult to make comparisons with the past, and that is something that I have stressed with my team, is that we do need to understand more about this crime, and that's absolutely what we will do. Members may be pleased to know that there have been at least 3 recent arrests for this, and there are a number of active police investigations underway, and I very much hope that we will be able to bring more perpetrators to justice in the coming weeks. Of course.
Steve Baker.
Mr. Brown, very grateful for what she said. Would she undertake to carry out some kind of public information to make sure that potential perpetrators are aware of the gravity of the offences that they're considering? Because we do need to make sure that people are dissuaded from what is, I think we've all agreed, a very serious set of crimes.
Yes, I think my Honourable Friend makes an extremely good point. We have a number of communications plans within the wider violence against women and girls strategy, and we will absolutely make sure that this issue is included in that work, which I'm sure he will welcome. So the Home Secretary has already asked the National Police Chiefs Council to urgently review the extent and scale of the issue, and we are receiving regular reports from the police. We are working locally, regionally and nationally, including with our partners in the National Crime Agency. The NPCC have convened a group of policing leads, including Jason Harwin, Maggie Blythe, who is the government's new lead on violence against women and girls. That group has been convened. It's meeting several times a week with the aim of understanding the issue and ensuring that there is a strong police response. Now, turning to the licensing regime, and I think it was the Honourable Member for Warwick and Leamington who referenced that not all of these cases occur in nightclubs. It may have been that member, or possibly not. It was a member for Sheffield, apologies. Not all of these attacks occur in nightclubs, but our understanding is that the majority of these settings are probably specifically targeted by offenders. I'll give way.
Paul Blomfield.
I mean, obviously there are kind of lots of numbers floating around, and probably many of them underestimate the scale of the problem. But my understanding is that the Alcohol Education Trust has done some work on this and suggested that actually slightly more incidents of drink spiking are at house parties than in nightclubs. So, how does the government reflect on that in terms of the strategy that they're looking at?
Yes, sir.
I welcome his remarks, and I think it's important that we do continue, as we are doing, to ensure that we gather data from all of these incidences, whether they are at home or in nightclubs. But just turning to the issue of nightclubs, which was the subject of the debate, it is really important to say that there is nothing stopping a nightclub from introducing searches on entry, and a number of nightclubs are doing that already. And just to highlight, Lincolnshire Police are working with their local licensing authority and a local nightclub to address concerns about spiking. The club has made an extra search going into the premises, a condition of entry, and in addition they're using stickers to place over the tops of the drinks within the premises at key locations. And many other clubs across the country are doing that as well. We've heard reference to the work of Devon and Cornwall. And in fact, I conducted a quick straw poll with my own children, who are all of clubbing age, and I heard that actually 2 of my children have been out clubbing in London over the weekend and had seen in action some quite detailed and quite thorough searches when they themselves went into clubs. Yes, I will.
Rushna Ali.
Very grateful to her for giving way, but can she just clarify what she's going to do quickly to make sure all nightclubs follow those good examples that she's citing, because that's what she's responsible for, making it happen and giving families across the country the reassurance they need that whichever nightclub young people go to, they can go safely.
Minister.
Yes, I'm coming on to do that, and I very much hope to satisfy the honourable lady. So it is important that I do make it clear that the premises and nightclubs have a responsibility, and I will set out in what if she will bear with me. So those premises who have a high volume of customers are required to assess what steps they think are needed for their particular venue. But we aren't solely reliant on venues taking actions themselves. So the law already allows relevant conditions to be imposed. So first of all, the Licensing Act of 2003, which governs the control and issuance of licences to sell alcohol, allows local licensing authorities to take a tailored approach to granting premises licences in order to uphold the 4 licensing objectives. And the most relevant here is, of course, the objective to prevent crime and disorder. It is important that I just state that that Act only applies to premises in England and Wales. Licensing is devolved in Scotland. I do note the petitioner is from Scotland, so I would definitely encourage her to have similar conversations with her local authorities, and I very much hope that they will consider those issues themselves. So licensing authorities can impose conditions on any business that wants to sell alcohol in order to reduce crime, and that can include requiring the presence of suitably trained and accredited door staff or CCTV, for example, and a licensing authority can also require a licence holder to introduce entry searches as a condition of a premises licence. So we have a rich and diverse nighttime economy across the country, catering to many different communities, big cities with a large student population, many members have referenced their local universities, and also towns with a high proportion of family, holiday visitors, rural pubs, nightclubs, venues in villages, everything in between. And it's a fundamental premise, and I think this is important, that with very few exceptions, decisions on which licences to grant and how those premises should be managed are made taking account of local issues, demographics and circumstances. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach to licensed premises. We don't wish to see mandated national conditions which could be disproportionate and burdensome to some venues, and even amongst nightclubs there's a huge diversity of premises, where what is required for one will not work for another. And I should... Sorry, did she want to give way? I will allow her, but I do need to also allow some time for the member to sum up. Yes.
I just wonder how many licensing committees she thinks have got their eye on violence against women and girls across the country and are going to be paying attention to this issue.
I can assure her that we insist and we require them to do so, and it's part of their statutory duty, and they are of course accountable to their populations, and they are staffed by locally demographically accountable members of their council. Thank you. So I also want to make the House aware that the police already have considerable powers to take action where they think there is a problem. So they can call for a review of a premises licence and work with the management and licensing authority. So local mechanisms can introduce searches where they're needed more quickly than waiting for a national mandate to be brought into effect. So licensing laws allow longer-term measures as well to improve management of the nighttime economy. For example, the nighttime levy, which some members may be familiar with, that enables local authorities to collect a financial contribution from businesses. And some of those initiatives are really helpful, and they have been used to fund additional police officers, community protection officers, and local projects such as club host and taxi marshals, all of which can help keep people safe. The Act also allows for a licensing authority to carry out a cumulative impact assessment to help it to limit the number of types of licence applications granted in areas where there is some evidence to show that the number or density of licensed premises in the area is having a cumulative impact and leading to some problems which could undermine the licensing objectives. So, as I said already, the nighttime economy is varied and diverse and covers many types of areas. And so, alongside the specific measures that I've already outlined, there are other things that local areas can and should be doing. And I have been impressed by some of the initiatives that I have seen around the country. Some areas have introduced safe spaces, areas where a combination of medical assistance, supervised recovery and other support services is provided to intoxicated, injured or vulnerable individuals. Another area I've seen a scheme where door staff convert into street marshals at the end of the night across the whole city centre. And I pay tribute to other organisations such as street pastors who provide invaluable assistance. And members have also highlighted very good work going on with their local forces and with some of their local universities. In addition, initiatives like Ask for Angela, X Marks the Spot, Safe Havens and A Good Night Out also provide opportunities for everyone who's concerned for their safety to help. So many members have talked about the wider and broader issues of violence against women and girls, and I do want to come onto that, Mr Gray. We published our new cross-government Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls strategy this summer to help ensure that women and girls are safe everywhere. And I do want to actually just pause here for one moment and say that I fully agree with all the comments that have been made by members that this is not about blaming women or requesting or expecting women to change their behaviour. It is about tackling the root cause of this violence. I also recognise what the Honourable Member for Wickham has said. This is not about all men who are perpetrating these crimes, but it is absolutely about recognising that the majority of these spiking incidents, in particular, the victims that we know about are women and they are young women. And so it is absolutely at the forefront of the government's mind and our priority to tackle the perpetrators and prevent this from happening. So we, on some of the specific work that we have already funded, we are delivering a pilot £5 million Safety of Women at Night fund, and that's focused on preventing violence against women and girls in public spaces at night, including particularly in the nighttime economy. And that's in addition to the £25 million Safer Streets fund, and that again focuses on improving public safety with an emphasis on women and girls' safety and those feelings of safety in public spaces. So the member for Yardley has referenced the doorkeepers and their qualifications. It's a really important issue. I've met with the Security Industry Authority and I can assure her that they are very cognizant of this issue. They are working to ensure that door supervisors and security guards' qualifications include specific content relating to violence against women and girls, and they are working now at pace to remind the industry and those operatives of their role and responsibility to keep people safe with a focus on women's safety. And in our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, we have committed to working further to see what more we can do to strengthen those safeguards. So just to finish my remarks, Mr Gray, because I do want to allow time for the Honourable Member for Gower, I just want to finish by saying that violence against women and girls is utterly abhorrent. And as I set out, the government is taking wide-range action to prevent these crimes, support victims and pursue perpetrators. I want to finish by congratulating the Honourable Lady for Gower on her speech. I fully agree that some of the issues that she's highlighted around our sexist and victim-blaming culture are wrong and need to stop. And we in the government are completely behind that, and the measures that I've set out and more are the measures that we will be using to bear down on this abhorrent behaviour. And we are putting the full force of the government behind tackling this issue because we want women and girls to feel safe when they are going out at night. Thank you, Mr Gray.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
Mr Gray, and I welcome the comments that the Minister has made in response to the petition. And I'd like to thank everybody that has participated from the backbenches today and for their comments. I think one of the things that comes across is the need for consistency, for people to be working together, and for all organisations to be ensuring that this doesn't continue and it is addressed by the government. And I welcome the comments made by the Honourable Member for Wickham when he says that, you know, we need to have a campaign which raises the profile of this. So when the Minister spoke about, you know, the public information and the communication plan, I hope to see this at the forefront, especially now with young people in university and more active going out in the nighttime economy. So I'll just refer to some of my notes. I mean, it's, you know, my honourable friend from Leamington Spa, talked about pulling the local authorities together with young people to discuss what is happening in his constituency. I'll be suggesting some of the things today with my Swansea colleagues to meet the local nighttime industry and also to work with the licensing agencies. And it is important that people who set up campaigns, in the UK, know where the licensing laws and the local authorities and where those responsibilities lie, so that they can take this further. But to thank Hannah Thompson, because what she set up has brought a debate in this House which is so important. It's not about chivalry, it's about working together. It's not about calling out any particular people, but we do need to raise the way we treat women and girls in this country is frankly a disgrace. I am fed up of hearing about how we are, just putting them aside. I hate the word banter. I have a 17-year-old son that thinks banter is hilarious. It's not hilarious because it has consequences, and we have to change our mindset, our culture. We have to deal with the online harms bill. We have to make sure that our young people, our women and girls are safe, and that we have a respectful culture in this country where we can all go about our lives and live our best lives. So thank you, Minister. Thank you to our benches, and thank you, Chair.
The question is, this House considered E-petition 598986 relating to safety of nightclubs. As members open and say aye. Aye. Contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.